Jasmine Crockett entered Joe Rogan's Austin studio, expecting it to be just another typical podcast session discussing legislation and her role in Congress. She had previously done many interviews, from CNN to smaller Texas networks, always managing to hold her ground with quick replies and in-depth knowledge of policies. However, she didn't know Rogan had spent a great deal of time creating what he believed would be a flawless setup, a strategically formed question aimed at revealing what he considered her main contradiction on matters of race. What followed shocked Rogan into utter silence, left his producer scrambling to record every second, and sparked the most viral political podcast moment of 2025. The footage would spread like wildfire online, inspire thousands of response videos, and shift how viewers perceived both figures in completely unexpected ways. The studio in Texas was dim, as usual, with its well-known brick background, UFC items, and the signature table where Rogan had questioned guests, ranging from Elon Musk to presidential hopefuls. Across from him sat the Dallas lawmaker, and he wore his familiar grin, ready to launch what he believed was a winning gotcha question. His team had spent days studying for this, certain they had uncovered the ideal weak spot to take down the rising Democratic figure. But Crockett, who had once defended clients in Dallas courtrooms for 15 years against tough prosecutors, biased judges, and unfriendly witnesses, was about to reverse the whole scenario in a way that left Rogan stunned and sent the internet into a frenzy of clips, memes, and political debates. She hadn't walked in unprepared. She came with her own plan, her own angle, and a deep understanding of Rogan's tactics and behavior. Within mere hours of the podcast being released, her answer clips had received over 50 million views across TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Hashtags like #Crockett crushes Rogan, #Rogan outclassed, and #Jasmine vs. Joe trended globally for 3 days straight. Even Rogan's most loyal supporters, those who had defended him through every scandal, admitted in forums and comment threads that she completely outplayed him on his turf, using his style against him. Before we explore how this Texas lawyer stunned Joe Rogan into rare silence, don't forget to click subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss a moment of these intense political battles. Trust me, after seeing what went down in that Austin studio, you'll want to keep up with every development and its impact on the political scene. The moment began like any other, with Rogan in his comfort zone, leaning back confidently in his seat, that relaxed attitude that made him the podcasting king. He thought he was about to land a major blow on a rising Democrat, one that would dominate online conversations for weeks and cement his reputation as the host who exposed political falsehoods. What he didn't know was that Crockett had trained for exactly this type of face-off all her professional life, first in legal courtrooms, and now in the political ring. To grasp why this clash was so intense, and why it grabbed worldwide attention, you must understand who both individuals truly are, what they represent, and what was at stake in that studio. Joe Rogan built his media empire by asking bold questions that traditional journalists often avoided. With more than 14 million Spotify followers, a $200 million exclusive deal, an influence stretching beyond podcasting into politics and pop culture, he became one of the strongest voices in independent media. His lengthy shows have boosted careers, damaged reputations, and changed how people talk about everything from COVID-19 to presidential campaigns. Rogan took pride in catching guests off guard with sharp, sudden questions, especially politicians he believed were fake or misleading. His interviewing method blended relaxed chats with fast twists meant to uncover contradictions or provoke slip-ups guests didn't plan on revealing. He had a skill for making political guests uneasy by asking questions that sounded fair but had hidden traps. For months before the interview, Rogan had been increasingly outspoken against what he called woke politicians, whom he claimed cared more about appearances and identity than actual answers to U.S. problems. He repeatedly highlighted young Democratic women in Congress, saying they lacked depth, leaned on emotional speeches instead of facts, and fell apart under real pressure. To him, Jasmine Crockett was a perfect example of that, a fairly new Congresswoman, first elected in 2022. She had already gone viral for fiery arguments with Republican members and passionate speeches about race issues. Rogan and his researchers believed she embodied everything wrong with today's left-wing politics: high on performance, low on depth, and easy to challenge logically. But they seriously misjudged the real Jasmine Crockett. At 43, she wasn't just another elected official who moved up through networking or campaign donations. She was a seasoned trial attorney who had fought difficult cases in Dallas for 15 years, representing clients others avoided, and standing against prosecutors, judges, and jurors who often seemed biased. She came from a modest background in St. Louis, raised in a working-class family where education mattered but money was tight. She paid her own way through college and law school, taking loans and juggling jobs. Rather than join a wealthy law firm after graduation, she chose public defense, helping those who couldn't afford legal help, many facing years in jail for crimes they may not have committed. Inside those courtrooms, she learned how to react fast, flip tough questions on her opponents, and stay strong under pressure. She mastered how to weaponize her opponent's assumptions and wait for the perfect moment to strike with maximum effect. What made this face-off even more powerful was the fact that Crockett had studied Rogan. Long before accepting his invite, she knew his techniques, his top trap questions, and how he liked to corner progressive guests. She had watched hours of his past interviews with political figures, noticing how he carefully laid out traps and activated them at just the right time. She had seen him destroy unready politicians with questions that seemed easy but were really well-planned attacks. She didn't show up to Rogan's studio unarmed. She brought her own game plan, her own research, and a clear understanding of the environment she was stepping into. While Rogan assumed she would be another left-leaning guest caught off guard, Crockett knew she was dealing with someone who thrived on revealing flaws and capitalizing on lack of preparation. Both had a lot riding on this moment. For Rogan, it was a chance to prove that another liberal lawmaker wasn't ready for real pressure, that their story about racial injustice would collapse under firm questioning. A strong performance would strengthen his claim that many Democratic voices were more show than substance. For Crockett, this was a huge opportunity to speak directly to Rogan's enormous following, many of whom had never heard a Democrat explain their views without being cut off or squeezed into short TV segments. More than that, it was her chance to show that this new wave of Democrats would not shy away from aggressive interviews or tough questions. The political world was watching because Crockett wasn't just another politician. She was a black woman from Texas who didn't back down, who had already earned national attention for challenging Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and who clearly enjoyed the combative nature of today's political conversation. If Rogan managed to shake her, embarrass her, or catch her in contradictions, it would boost his influence and prove his criticism of liberal politicians being unready for tough debates. But if she stood her ground and fought back intelligently, it would mark a turning point, showing that Democratic leaders were evolving and ready to go toe-to-toe in any arena, even those built to challenge them. As they took their seats in that Austin studio, neither realized they were about to create one of 2025's most talked about political moments, a moment that would be reviewed, debated, and remembered for a long time. Rogan thought he was the skilled predator setting up a flawless trap, but Crockett had already learned how to disarm predators and rewrite the rules of the game. Crockett was about to reveal who the true predator in that room actually was. The talk kicked off just like most of Joe Rogan's episodes do, laid back, friendly, and almost surprisingly relaxed. For the first 20 minutes, they chatted about Crockett's personal history, her journey from public defense to serving in Congress, and her involvement in multiple committees. Rogan appeared sincerely curious about her legal experience, asking deep questions about the justice system and her time defending clients without the means for private lawyers. But anyone who knows Rogan's style recognized this part as the opening act. He was laying the groundwork, building comfort with the guest, and waiting for the ideal moment to change lanes. Crockett, well aware of his methods, noticed the familiar rhythm and mentally prepared for the turn. Around the 20 mark, Rogan's body language subtly shifted. He adjusted in his seat, leaned in with that familiar posture fans would recognize, and his voice changed, signaling he was about to deliver what he believed would be a knockout. The relaxed tone was done. Now, the actual interrogation was beginning. "So, Jasmine," he began, his voice edged with the assertiveness that helped make him a household name. "I want to bring up something that really bothers me, not just about your party, but about the whole discussion on race in this country." Crockett lifted one eyebrow, staying calm. She had been ready for this moment and had prepared thoroughly for whatever route he might take. "You Democrats keep bringing up systemic racism and how the whole system is stacked against Black Americans," Rogan said, clearly confident with where this was leading. "You talk about obstacles, bias, and how tough it is for Black folks to get ahead in this country." He paused intentionally, a move he often makes before landing what he believes to be a critical blow. But here you are, a black woman who went through law school, built a thriving legal career, and now sits in Congress representing a major district. You've achieved more than nearly all Americans, regardless of race. Doesn't your success prove that the system isn't as racist or broken as you and your party often argue? The question lingered, clearly meant as a challenge. It was Rogan's trademark move, a question that sounds fair and reasonable on the surface, but is crafted to corner his guest. If Crockett agreed, she'd contradict her party's core beliefs about racial inequality. If she disagreed, Rogan could argue that her own life was proof against systemic injustice, a common trap that had caught other Democrats before, forcing them to fumble or appear inconsistent. The studio grew quiet, except for the faint buzz of recording gear. Rogan leaned back, wearing the look he gets when he believes he's just nailed it. Behind the glass, his producer was probably already thinking about which segment would go viral. But instead of looking rattled, Crockett smiled. Not an anxious smile, a confident one. The type that seasoned trial attorneys give when their opponent walks right into their carefully set net. "Joe, that's an intriguing question," she replied, her tone steady. "But before I respond, mind if I ask you something first?" Rogan, still feeling in control and thinking any delay would only weaken her reply, nodded. "Sure, go for it. You grew up middle class in New Jersey, right?" she asked casually, but her gaze was locked in. "Your dad was a cop. Your mom had a job. You had a stable home life." "Yeah, that's accurate. What's your point?" Rogan responded, now starting to sense something unexpected, but not quite sure what it was. "And you didn't finish college. You got into stand-up, then martial arts, then TV, and eventually, you built a massive media empire." Crockett continued, keeping it conversational, but inching closer to her point. "You've got the most popular podcast on earth. Presidents, A-list celebrities, you've spoken to them all. You've got more reach than most politicians." Rogan shifted again, clearly trying to guess where she was heading. "Okay, yeah, I've been lucky," he admitted. "Then here's my question for you, Joe," she said, leaning in slightly. "Would you say your own success means anyone in America can become a multimillionaire media mogul just by working hard and making good decisions?" Now the trap was clear. Rogan's confidence started to fade. He realized he was no longer steering the discussion. "Well, no. I mean, I had some benefits and got lucky with timing," he began. "Exactly," Crockett said sharply, switching into full trial mode. "You had advantages: a steady-to-parent household, a safe environment, access to opportunities. You never had to worry about food, safety, or the basics. So your success doesn't erase the fact that others face hardships. You never had to think about, does it?" Rogan tried to interject, but Crockett had the floor, and she wasn't giving it up. "Now, to your original question, Joe," she continued, her voice rising with confidence and passion. "I think it shows a deep misunderstanding of what systemic racism really is, and how it plays out across this country. You appear to believe that when some black individuals manage to succeed despite facing challenges, it somehow means those challenges aren't real. That's similar to saying, because certain people survive car accidents must not be dangerous. Or, because some people recover from cancer must not be a serious illness." The analogy was basic but powerful, and you could clearly see Rogan mentally working through it, searching for a response that might return him to safe footing. "I didn't achieve success because racism in the system doesn't exist, Joe. I succeeded, even though the system is racist," Crockett continued, her tone now firm, filled with the weight of personal experience. "In law school, I had to put in twice the effort compared to my white classmates, just to be respected. I had to repeatedly prove myself in ways they never had to. I had to be better prepared, sharper, and more professional, just to be seen as capable." She stopped for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle before going on. "And even now, as a member of Congress, I still deal with insults, doubts, and assumptions about my intelligence and ability, things my white male peers rarely face. The fact that I made it through those obstacles doesn't mean they're imaginary. It just means I was lucky to have support, tools, and the persistence to keep going." Rogan attempted to steer the interview back into his control. "But Jasmine, don't you think sometimes Democrats use racism as a scapegoat when people don't succeed?" Crockett cut him off with precision, her courtroom instincts kicking in, not allowing him to change the direction or dodge the issue. "When we point out well-documented differences in school, funding between majority white and majority black districts. When we bring up clear evidence of bias in the justice system that leads to harsher punishments for the same crimes. When we talk about the racial wealth gap caused by decades of unfair housing, hiring, and banking practices, the whole atmosphere shifted. Rogan, who usually took charge in his interviews with charisma and rapid-fire questioning, now found himself on the back foot, facing someone just as sharp, but far more ready for this moment. "I want to ask you something, Joe," Crockett said, her tone gaining that sharp edge that lawyers use before delivering a final blow in court. "Have you ever had store security follow you around just because your skin color made them assume you might steal something?" Rogan shook his head, clearly uneasy with the turn the discussion had taken. "Have the police ever pulled you over simply for driving while white in a place you had every right to be? Have you ever walked into a business meeting and someone assumed you were the janitor, not a participant?" Each question landed like a targeted hit, slowly tearing apart the basis of Rogan's argument and leading to something much more forceful. "Have you ever had to explain to your children how to act around police to avoid being harmed during a normal traffic stop? Have you ever had to tell your kids why strangers might treat them unfairly just because of how they look?" Rogan's usual self-assurance was visibly breaking down. "No, but then maybe," Crockett interrupted calmly, but with the weight of someone speaking from real-life experience. "You're not in the right position to decide whether systemic racism is real or not." The pause that followed was unlike anything regular Rogan fans had heard before. For once, Joe Rogan, a man known for interviewing presidents, tech moguls, and cultural giants, had no reply. No follow-up, no way to pull the conversation back under his control. What followed became the most viewed, most dissected, and most referenced moment in podcasting history. The silence lasted only 10 or 15 seconds, but it felt endless. Rogan sat motionless, clearly rattled. His usual quick wit nowhere to be found. His producer, visible behind the soundproof glass, was scribbling notes like mad, possibly aware they were witnessing something historic. And once it became clear Rogan had no comeback, Crockett delivered what would become the decisive moment. Not just ending his argument, but shattering the way he approached conversations about race. "You know what, Joe," she said, steady and composed, her tone like someone delivering a closing argument after a clear courtroom win. "I actually thank you for having me here and asking that question, because this talk proves exactly what I've been trying to say." Rogan's face went red, part embarrassment, part frustration, and the slow realization that he had badly misjudged who he was talking to. "You invited me, thinking you'd catch me in a contradiction, using my success story to downplay what millions of Black Americans go through every day," she went on, leaning back with the ease of someone who had not only survived an ambush but turned it into her victory. "But here's what you didn't expect, and clearly didn't prepare for," Crockett continued, her tone turning colder, more like a seasoned prosecutor addressing the court. "I'm not here to be your symbol of Black success. I'm not here to comfort you or support your belief that racism isn't real. I came because I have something important to say. And unlike many politicians, I'm not afraid to say it, even when it makes people uneasy." She paused again, letting that sink in, while Rogan appeared visibly stunned and unable to come up with a reply. "The fact that you believe my success proves systemic racism isn't real," she said, "is exactly why we still need these conversations, especially when they're uncomfortable. You don't see the obstacles because you've never had to face them. You don't get the struggle because you've never lived it. And that's fine. No one expects you to know everything. But it means you need to listen to people who have lived this reality, instead of trying to argue away experiences you've never had." The room went quiet. Only the faint hum of equipment and a soft rustle of papers behind the glass could be heard. Rogan, always known for having a response, suddenly looked like he wanted to disappear. But Crockett wasn't done. She was about to say the one line that would be remembered in political debates, cited in classrooms, and shared widely across the internet. "And to be honest, Joe," she said with a small smile, kind, but also razor sharp, "if you truly believe the system isn't racist, then explain to me why you were so shocked that a Black woman from Dallas could out-argue you on your own show." The statement landed like a lightning strike. It wasn't simply an answer to his question. It directly challenged his beliefs, his assumptions, and how he was handling the interview. With just one sentence, she flipped his tricky question into a reflection of his own false ideas. Rogan's jaw slightly dropped. After more than 10 years of podcasting, through countless hours speaking with some of the smartest and most well-spoken people on the planet, he had rarely been so completely outplayed. The one trying to trap had become the one trapped. And he hadn't seen it happening. "Look, Jasmine, I didn't mean to," he began, his voice lacking its usual strength. "Yes, you did," Crockett cut in. But her voice wasn't harsh or blaming. It was soft, like a teacher kindly correcting a student's mistake. "And that," she said, "is exactly the issue I'm talking about. You were more focused on catching me, so sure you'd reveal some sort of contradiction, that you didn't take the time to actually hear what I had to say." She leaned in a little, her tone shifting to one likely used in Dallas courtrooms when she had to help juries understand something deeply important. "You made guesses about who I am and what I stand for without doing your research. You thought, just because I've done well, I must not understand the challenges other Black people face. You believed my success canceled out my community's struggles." Rogan slightly nodded, clearly accepting her points, though unable to respond. "I spent 15 years working as a public defender in Dallas," she continued. "Do you know what that means, Joe?" Her voice held the weight of real-life experience. "It means I've seen how the system really works, when no cameras are watching and when politicians aren't delivering speeches." She started counting examples on her fingers, each one hitting with sharp accuracy. "I've watched innocent people get pushed through the legal system because they didn't have skilled lawyers. I've seen judges give stricter sentences to Black people for the same crimes white people committed. I've sat in courtrooms where juries were clearly picked to leave out people who looked like my clients. I've dealt with prosecutors offering better plea deals to white defendants than to Black ones with the same charges. I've read police reports that somehow changed between the event and the trial. I've lived this, Joe. I didn't just read it in books or watch it in documentaries." The power in the room had not just shifted, it had fully reversed. Rogan, who usually controlled the conversation, was now being thoroughly taken apart by someone clearly ready for this moment. "So when you ask if my success proves racism doesn't exist," she concluded, her voice calm but firm like a final courtroom statement, "you're basically asking me to forget everything I've seen, everything I've gone through, and everything I've fought against for 20 years. Just because I made it through doesn't mean the system is fair. That's not how logic works, Joe. That's not how proof works. And it's definitely not how justice works." What made the moment even more powerful was how she stayed throughout the exchange. She didn't yell, she didn't get emotional. She didn't attack him personally or bring in politics. She simply used facts, reasoning, her personal journey, and even Rogan's own words to carefully take apart his argument while revealing the deep flaws in his mindset. The clip of her final question, "If you truly believe the system isn't racist, then tell me why you were so shocked that a Black woman from Dallas could out-debate you on your own show," was shared millions of times in just a few hours. It quickly became a viral meme, a slogan, and a clear example of how race and ability are still judged unfairly in America. What made it even stronger was that she had used Rogan's usual style against him. She turned his trap into a lesson, his attempt to corner her into a mirror showing his own bias, and his confidence into the very example of the issue she had been explaining all along. The reaction right after the episode aired was something the podcast world had never seen before. Just minutes after the episode hit Spotify, clips were everywhere online. The response was so big and so fast, it even caused short outages on some platforms as millions rushed to watch and share it. On Twitter, #CrockettDestroysRogan started trending within 30 minutes and stayed among the top hashtags for 3 days straight. That one clip of her final powerful question, "Explain to me why you were so surprised that a black woman from Dallas could out-debate you on your own show," reached over 15 million views in just the first 6 hours. People from all political sides responded in ways that shocked many. Liberal voices praised it, calling it a masterclass in dealing with bad questions and a long overdue check on Rogan's views. MSNBC's Joy Reid tweeted, "Jasmine Crockett just gave every politician a guide on how to turn hostile interviews into lessons." Even more surprising, moderates and some conservatives responded positively. Ben Shapiro wrote, "I don't agree with all her politics, but I respect how she handled it. She was calm, clear, and made her points without getting rude or playing victim." Matt Walsh, a conservative blogger who had criticized her before, posted, "She was prepared. She knew her stuff. She flipped Rogan's question right back at him perfectly." This is what real political conversation should be, debating real ideas instead of repeating talking points. Even loyal Rogan fans admitted she had turned the tables. One fan page with over 200,000 followers wrote, "I've listened to Joe for 8 years. Never seen someone flip the script like that. She didn't just survive, she taught him, and us, something. The podcast episode became Spotify's most played in history, even beating Rogan's famous talks with Elon Musk and Donald Trump. News outlets around the world reported the story. The BBC, The Guardian, and other big European media called it the interview that changed American politics. But the effect went way beyond likes or play counts. In just 2 days, Crockett's office said they got over 50,000 messages of support, most from people who didn't even know her before. Her campaign donation website crashed due to too much traffic, as small donations started flowing in from every part of the US. Even Democratic leaders, who earlier stayed away from Rogan's podcast, started thinking again. If Jasmine can enter a tough space like that and not only survive, but actually win, one senior Democrat advisor said, "We need to change our media game plan." The clip was being studied in journalism classes, political science courses, and communication schools nationwide. Professor Maria Rodriguez from Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism said it was a perfect case of how smart preparation, realness, and clear thinking can help in even the hardest interviews. News networks ran full discussions breaking down every part of the talk. CNN's media critic Brian Stelter said, "Crockett turned a tricky question into a mirror. She didn't let Rogan lead the conversations. She made him rethink his own views." Memes and reaction videos exploded online. On TikTok, creators made hundreds of clips explaining her moves, using hashtags like Sonic Crockett Masterclass and How to Debate Rogan, gathering millions of views. Comedy shows joined in. Saturday Night Live made a full sketch that ended with their Rogan character sitting silently in shock. But maybe the biggest and fastest effect was on Rogan himself. After the talk, he did something his loyal fans almost never saw. He admitted defeat. "I got schooled," he said in his next episode. "I thought I had a clever question, but she flipped it on me. She made me realize I had unchecked assumptions." It was a rare public moment of humility from someone known for being confident and bold. The political outcome was huge. Democratic advisors started studying what Crockett did as a new way to handle hard interviews. On the other side, Republicans warned their candidates not to judge others just by race or how new they are to politics. Even right-wing media hosts had to admit Crockett did well. Fox News anchor Tucker Carlson, who often criticizes Democrats, said, "You may not agree with her views, but that was powerful. She turned a difficult moment into a full win." The interview also kicked off serious talks about media bias, how interviews should be done, and how racial topics are discussed in US politics. Writers from all political sides used the moment to go deeper into themes like systemic racism, personal success, and social class in America. Academics also looked at the interview. They said, it showed how the power between speaker and host can shift in real time. Dr. Jennifer Williams at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government wrote, "Crockett showed that it's not just about being ready, it's about changing the whole conversation to make the other person's hidden views visible." The result for both Crockett and Rogan was big and quick. For Crockett, the episode took her from being a little-known new congresswoman to a national name. She started getting requests from colleges, political groups, and news channels. Book publishers contacted her. Donors who didn't know her before started sending money. More importantly, she became the top choice for tough interviews about race and policy. If networks needed a Democrat to speak in tough spaces, Crockett was the first name mentioned. For Rogan, the interview was both a lesson and a reminder of how important his show still is. Yes, he clearly lost the debate, but the massive response proved his podcast still matters a lot in US politics. After this, politicians no longer saw his show as just casual chat. They started preparing for it like they would for a big debate or serious hearing. The days of going in relaxed and unprepared were now over. Media coaching companies even launched new training focused on the Crockett method, how to answer tough questions by turning them into chances to explain and win people over. Political advisors began studying her way of staying calm while breaking down her opponent's logic. The culture shift may have been the biggest of all. The talk became a reference in debates about racism, success in America, and why it's important to listen to people with different life stories. Students mentioned it in college essays, professors cited it in research papers, and teachers used it in classes on media, politics, and social justice. But perhaps the strongest message of all was this: if you're smart, prepared, and strategic, you can beat even the hardest interviews. Crockett proved that politicians don't have to be victims in tough talks. They can turn them into powerful moments to teach, persuade, and even win big. Now, the interview is used as a must-watch case study in schools on media, politics, and communication. It showed that even in today's divided media world, one bold and smart conversation can still grab the nation's attention and shift how we see important issues. As we close this amazing story of how a congresswoman from Dallas stunned America's most powerful podcaster, don't forget to subscribe for more political stories and updates. The Crockett-Rogan debate proved one major truth. In politics, the biggest wins don't always come from running away from tough questions, but by being so ready that you turn them into your opponent's biggest mistake. Tap that like button if you believe Jasmine Crockett just pulled off one of the greatest political comebacks in recent memory. And let us know in the comments who should take on Joe Rogan next. After this, they better come seriously prepared.